All right. Good morning, everyone. So we are going to start from where we left behind. So we talked about basics of auditing frameworks, and ISACA's approach to audit. So we talked about all these things. So now we'll discuss about what are the differences between the standards, guidelines, and procedures, right? So we start from this slide. If you look at the basics differences of standards, guidelines, and procedures, so standards are like best practices, right? So they are best practices, uh, and it's not that easy to come up with standards, so the process is quite lengthy. So everybody should understand that. So a lot of effort is needed to come up with standards. It's true for any of these things, but especially standards, because if you don't use the correct standard, you will end up as a failure, right? Because the best practice should always deliver the right thing. So if it delivers the wrong thing or the failure, so there's no use of using a standard at all. So standard creation process is quite a lengthy process. And then guidelines can differ time to time. So we'll go through example. So guidelines are more like how to, or what to, right? What to, yes, it's like what to, right? And procedures is more like how to, right? So if you look at example, uh, setting up a password, right? So setting up a password, so we go through every day. um, we know that so the standard these days is use 12 characters or like 14 characters for your password. So that's like the best practice right now. So even standards change, right? So there were days where password minimum the number of characters for a password is 10 or 8 or 6, but now it's gone up 12 or even 14 with the issues that's happening around. Okay, so that can be the standard. And also use alphanumerics. Don't use repetitive patterns like 1 2 3 3 2 1, and don't use most of the dictionary words. Don't use names of your friends, relatives or loved ones, right? So because people can guess it. So all these things are the standards, so you know about it. And the guideline is like what you can do, right? So what you can do. So there you have to specify exactly, right? So from deriving from the standard, you have to specify that directly. So what exactly will be covered in your standard. So this is the what aspect of it. And procedures, so as an example, like a good guideline is, so you can use a phrase like mm, i I like, uh, I like, say, studying or something, right? Studying. So that's a phrase, okay? So it's not good idea to use phrases, but still try to understand the model here. So eyes can be replaced by ones, right? So here a one, here another one. So L, if there's a L, always make it capital, right? If there's a K, you can replace it another one. So if you know, so that's your replacement, only you knows it. So E's can be with the at, right? And capital SS can be simple SS. So likewise, you define a kind of a guideline. So that gives you kind of a helping hand, right? And then procedure is like what exactly to be done. So you should have a clearly written down, document explaining how you can set your password. So this is basically the differences of standards, guidelines, and procedures. Right. So then we look into objectives of the ISACA audit standard. So inform management and other interested parties of the profession's expectations concerning the work of audit practitioners. So basically, get to know people about it, right? So this is always a difficulty of getting to know people or let people know what's really happening. So this is the objective of ISAC audit framework, and inform information system auditors of the minimum level of acceptable performance. So it's like what you call as the foundation. There should be a foundation. So if the foundation is not met, then there can be quite a problem. Okay, so this foundation is quite important. So once you have that foundation, anything can be built on top of it, right? So otherwise, if foundation is having issues, vulnerabilities, whatever you build on top of this will get doomed at one day. So you have to have a good foundation. This is like the minimal viability, right? Minimum viability levels, right? So at least that should be captured and implemented. Right, so this is the important stuff, right? So you will have to learn this really well. So I would highly recommend you to read the manual. The ISACA's manual on this. These are kind of a checklist. So I would see this as a simple checklist. So which you should not miss when you're doing an audit. It can be a self audit or it can be a real audit for a company. All right, so we go one by one. So there are a lot of things here. So we try to learn one by one. First, you have this thing called Audit Charter. So that's the first tick or the thing that you've checked in your audit list checklist. And then you have independence. So likewise, it goes around. So we'll discuss about these things in detail. So we have different slides prepared to discuss all these different things. But right now, what I want you to consider, this is a basic checklist. Okay. So we have another set of things in the next slide. So we have altogether 16 of them. So we'll go one by one. Right. So this is quite interesting, and try to make it more practical at a practical sense. So the first thing is the Audit Charter. So Audit Charter is basically a document which gives you the right or the freedom or the legal right to carry on the audit. So without this Audit Charter, like getting into audit can be quite dangerous. So you can get into legal trouble as well. And also this clears out the boundary, the scope, the work patterns, the plans, and everything. So, and also you get this final approval from the Audit Charter. So this should be signed by the management or the board of directors, depending on the company structure. And if it's a self-organization, maybe the owner, right? So, but this gives you the potential to do your audit without much of a difficulty. And also, it's provide you the responsibility and the purpose, what you should do, why you should do this, and also authority, right? So when you do audit, like you have to talk to a lot of people. So these people may be willing to talk to you or maybe reluctant to talk to you. It goes both ways, right? So it's not that easy to get through audit, because a lot of people uh, do not willing to work closely with the audit, because they have a kind of a bad feeling about audits all the time. So it's highly unlikely that you find people have a very positive mindsets towards audits. So this clears out all this we say shallow water around when you're dealing with such exercise. So audit charter is quite necessary. Okay. Right. So I will upload an example charter. Right. You can find some of those sample audit charters online. Right. So we'll be able to look at one of them. And second is audit independence. Right. So audit independence is quite an important term. So when you do such things, like when you are in a fact-finding mission, right, with the purpose of helping people, right, and you look into their issues, their mishaps, or their points to improve. Especially basically look at the say I would say the issues of these people, or issues with these processes, issues with these companies, or the departments. So when you do that, you need to keep an independence, right? So you shouldn't have any personal biasness towards this. So you have to be very professional. So you have a professional independence as well as organizational independence. So I'll give you one simple example to understand. So when you do an audit, you find that something is missing. Say when you do a network audit, right? Computer network audit, right? So you find that some devices are missing, like a firewall or intrusion detection system. So those things are missing. So always you guys can you know point out or say this is very important element in firewalling your organization, right? So you can have this internal firewalling thing, so then you can protect the outside threats, also like can prevent insiders doing other things. So then you can give a kind of a recommendation. Okay, so this sort of technology can be used. But if you go a little bit further down in the road and say, okay, it's always a good idea to let's say uh, give a second. All right, okay, so likewise you have to uh, make sure that the independence is there. So independence is something really important, because when the independence goes out, and like everything goes out, right? So it's something very valuable, right? So there's no point if you are doing audit without any independency, right? So because the audit can get void, because you are coming up with any fact finding or missing items because you want to get some value out of it, which is completely irrelevant. All right, moving on. So then, similar to what we discussed in independence, so you have to have a lot of ethics. So this is discussed more and more often, because we see that when the world is going uh, and things are moving with a lot of new things, technology and things like that, people forget about ethics. But what is really important at this time is that we should make sure that ethics are mandated, right? And also this thing called due professional care. So when you do some activity, you have to look at the overall good. So it's true that we do our work, we do our business to earn money, to sustain us, right? So that word sustain us means like we are looking towards our individual or our family growth. That's okay, but still understand everything is linked up. So everybody thinks in the same way. So we find a world where everybody is individualistic, right? So then there's no growth for the humanity, right? Or we don't find any growth in many aspects. So that's why we have to have due professional care. Whatever we do a lecture, we have to assume that people will learn out of it, people will get benefit out of it, people will improve their lifestyle rather than doing a lecture. If you are doing some software development, to make sure that it doesn't make any bad impact. Also, you say, as an example, we have seen games where it makes people lives miss and like with a lot of issues. So we should not do that. So that's what we mean by having due professional care. Right. Then competence, right? So when you do audit, you have to have the competence. You have to have the skills. So we say skills and also knowledge and attitude, right? So those things are really essential to conduct a proper audit. So you have to make sure you have the skills, knowledge, and especially the attitude. So attitude, in a way, relates to this and independence as well, right? And also continuous professional education, CPE, right? So these things are changing the life that we are living in. So if you are not learning about new things. Now, as an example, we should know how to these days work from home. So it involves all these other issues, right? So other issues involved with that. So we have to get knowledge that when you do remote work, what are the other concerns that we are having, right? Then another aspect which audit framework points out is a checklist. Next list item in the list is planning, right? So anything that we do, we have to plan that, and then according to the plan, we have to work it out, right? So that's the essential concept behind this, right? So you have to plan the audit coverage, including the scope, and also we do use. So we talked about this earlier. We talked about this risk-based concept. We define what is a risk, right? We gave a definition for the risk, and we learned about four code components of a risk, especially risk management, right? We talked about avoidance, we talked about mitigation, that's like reduction of the risk, and also we talked about transfer, like insurance, and also we talked about acceptance. So always we have to accept some of the risk and develop audit document and plan and develop audit program procedure. So this planning step is very important. It's basically not on into audit. There are so many things that we do in our daily life which needs planning, right? Then performance, right? So we have to understand when you do audit, it consumes a lot of things. It consumes so many things, right? So we have to make sure that performance is something that we do, right? So it's basically it goes like this. So there's this saying, what get measured get done. So if you metered everything, right? So and then you can if things are not going right in the direction that we're expecting, we can correct it. So measurement is something important. So performance also, in a way, is a measurement. So we have to supervise what we do, we have to get evidence, we have to document things, and then we can look at it and evaluate and we can correct things. So this is the other thing. Next 6 is performance of audit work. Right. Okay, and then the whole purpose of doing this thing would be um, to give the management the indication whether the going direction, going colors we say, good or bad. So we are moving towards our expectations, things are good. If we are going away from our expectations, things are bad. And so of course we have to look at the expectations of the organization and the stakeholders. Right? So if the expectations are not met, it is bad. So now we are learning about it, we are understanding about it, and we have to communicate it to the boss, right? So we have to communicate it to the boss. So boss needs information. So that's where you need the reporting, right? So identify the organization intended recipients, state the scope, findings, reports, everything should be in line. And when it goes to the management, so it makes sense and they know what to extract out of it, right? So reporting is essential item. So in this world of auditing, whether it's IS auditing or any other auditing, reporting is mandatory, right? So and reporting should be cohesive, complete, and unambiguous. I believe cohesiveness and completeness you can understand. It should be interrelated, interlinked, referred, and completed is it should be 100% complete, right? So if you have missing parts, our managers will get decisions based on incomplete information, which is really dangerous. And the other thing is, when you do reporting, it should be unambiguous. Ambiguity make a lot of issues, right? So when you say something like, okay, kill him, right? It means, at the word says kill him, or else it means completely something else depending on the context, right? So meaning kill him means, show him his weaknesses or something like that. So we don't know yet. So we have to use words which are not unambiguous, right? Okay. And then once you do something, right, it's very important to go in the cycle. So in the world, there are so many cyclic things, right? So there are so many cyclic things. So, so we do planning, we do things, and then we have to check things, and then we have to act on it. So this is a very basic cyclic thing called PDCA cycle, right? So the acting part is the follow-up activity, right? So we have to review previous findings and then determine how to incorporate it to the next planning phase, right? Then irregulars and illegal activities. Okay, when there we do the audits, we always, whether you like it or not, there you can find irregularities. So there are things which are not regular, right? So and then there are things which are illegal. So these are two different dimensions. So regularities might not be a illegal act, so there is no need to intervening of law enforcement. Of illegal act, as the auditor, you have to always remember there's a higher authority. So we cannot take decisions when that happens. If you see somebody is doing something bad, we have to report it, right? So that's how it goes, right? So otherwise, we are doing something illegal again. So not reporting also is illegal, especially in these professions, yes. So consider the risk of irregularities, illegal acts, maintain attitude of professional skepticism, right? So it's not opinion based. So you have a professional skepticism towards what's happening incorrect in this organization and obtain understanding of the organization's environment. So you can say whether it's illegal or irregular, right? Uh, Based on the organizational context. So you can't take your own decisions, but looking at from perspective whether it can be illegal. So there are so many not so illegal things in some countries. So we don't know yet, right? it depends on their context, right? So consider unusual or unexpected relationships. So there's a lot of human element in it, so you can find things out, figure things out, right? Test the appropriateness of the internal control. So this internal control is something that we're discussing later also. So when you talk about risk, right, so control is the answer. Controls would be something really valuable. Okay. Right. So and also assess any mistake. Right? So that is something that you do on the S9. Okay, it continues. So obtain written presentations from management. So when you do this, you have to be a bit careful because it can backfire to you. So one thing that you have to do is you send reports and also you get a kind of a feedback and an act or an act about it from the management. So whatever you produce will not get backfired to you. And have knowledge of any allegations of irregularities and illegal acts. So make sure that you know the big picture, what's happening around and things like that. Communicate material irregularities or illegal acts. Right? So if there's any material evidence, you guys can communicate it. Consider appropriate action in case of inability to continue performing the audit. So, and there is a brick wall, so you hit a wall. So you cannot go beyond that because of these irregularities. So rather stop the audit and report it, get the feedback, and then you stop whatever you're doing. So when you report, if it is not your duty to report it back to the law enforcement, then the management should do that. So you should get an idea from the management what they are taking, what are their follow-up activities on that. If you see that there is something going on fishy, that people are going to hide it. So if you are individual, you can talk to a lawyer. If you are in an organization, you can report to your audit organization and take steps down. Because as auditor, you might not be a lawyer, so you will never go into police and put an entry or something. I think it's illogical. Rather than that, you should go yeah, so you should go to the right track, the right track. All right. Then we have governance. So governance is one of the top priorities for any organization. And okay, and okay, so as I was saying, governance is top priorities, right? So when you, because governance comes from the top, right? It's nothing going from the bottom. So when something goes from the top to bottom, sometimes it makes sense when you go from bottom to top, but I do believe like going from top to bottom also in a way it's good because you see the holistic thing, that's going around. So it's quite important to look it from that perspective. So, so governance is basically the good practices that we use from within the organizations. Just give me a second. All right. We'll start the discussion again. So I had to pause a few times because a lot of polls coming from here and there. All right. So, so governance, we talked about governance, and also use a risk-based approach. So that's also important, and review and assess the risks that can affect. So this governance should give you overall. So actually, we're talking about that it's overall top-down approach, so that we see the holistic view of everything. So which then gives indication of what's happening right or wrong. Right? Okay, so then risk assessment. So it's related to what we discussed earlier also. So the audit that we do in information systems, right? So basically the core, the heart of it would be in terms of risk, right? So risk is like the heart of everything. So everything else connects to this risk framework or the idea of risk. So if you do a proper, like sometimes you can even go for assets. So we can get assets and then assets can be analyzed for risk items. So then we can decide product wise and process wise how we can implement the controls. So this can be internal controls or the other way around. All right. Okay, so then audit materiality. So the thing is this, what we should understand, right? So IS audit should consider audit materiality and its relationship to audit risk. So consider potential weaknesses and also cumulative effect of minor controls. So how things get implemented in the real world. So that has to be looked at. Okay. Okay. And okay, coming back. So IS audit reports. Okay. IS audit report should disclose ineffective controls or absence of control. So it gives you a present situation. Okay. Then using the work of other experts. So this is a very important aspect. So uh, we need a lot of expert we need other experts help when you are dealing with everyday issues. So as an example, think of your auditing ERP system. So you are a generic IS auditor. So there can be several situations where you might need the help of an expert. So that external help you have to get it from someone. Okay, so you have to call the experts and get it done. So IS auditor should be satisfied with the qualification. So you have to check for the qualifications. This is where like you have to get experts if they're having certifications. As an example, you have a CISSP, you can become expert in cybersecurity. Or if you have a CCIE in routing and switching, you can become expert in that particular domain. So there are so many expertise which are needed, and also years of experience. So all these things matters. The IS auditor should determine the work of other experts is adequate or complete. So then you should keep tabs on what they're doing. Right? So the purpose is to get the value of the expert to the ongoing process. Okay, and evidence. So evidence is also another important aspect. So because anything that we say in our report should not be opinion based. So if something is opinion based, it would result in kind of chaos. So we should have proper evidence to back up our theory. So it can be end of the statistics or any other thing. So it can be just data. So having that evidence, recording that evidence, storing that evidence, and probably doing analysis on the evidence is quite important. These days there are tools also to get this thing done. Okay, and then end of the day, right? So once you do this audit, you have to recommend controls, right? Controls is the given methodology to remove risks. So we talked about this earlier. So controls can be very useful, and keeping a tab on your controls also is very important, right? So this one 16 is sort of optional, so because not that all organizations need e-commerce, but if you have it, so you have to measure the risk of that as well. Right, so we talked about several things. So we have top 15 of this standard comes in the standard framework. So again, I'm reminding you that this should be goes as a checklist. This should go as checklist. All right, and then we jump into the next lesson. So in the next lesson, we talked about guidelines. So the previous it was like the standard, the best practice. Now it's moving into what what section. So I don't have any indicator to go ahead and detail of it, because this have you have to read through the manual. Uh, So then you have these guidelines can be read in the manual. So you find several guidelines here. So these can be detailed, like not like it's like a checklist again, true, but you have more detailed variations of what to be done, right? So that those are separate checklists altogether, right? Okay. So again, we have very similar things using the work of other auditors, right? So there's a guideline provided, right? So it's something that you see in the legal landscape also, like the precedents of what other people have done, and also audit evidence requirement, right? So there's a special guideline provided on this, and use of computer assisted tools. So this is very important because you're worried about the performance and the effectiveness of your audit. So whatever you have, as an example, there's a tool called ACL, Audit Command Language, which can be a handy tool to do the audits, right? And outsourcing of IS activities, so that's also, there's a guideline, so you have to follow that guideline. So see, like, these all help provided, right, for people to involve with the audit effectively, right? So there are things that already done, so why do you have to reinvent the wheel at times? So that's important. And also see, we look at the G5 of the framework, you will find audit charter, details of the formats and everything. And then the materiality concern, we talked about that as well in the standard. So see, things are linking up. So whatever that S, so S, whatever, say 5 or 6 or whatever. So that is given details on G6. And due professional care, again, we have seen that. Documentation, we have seen that. So try to link up these G's to the S's, right? So then you can have a very good, clear picture of what's happening. All right, so audit consideration for irregularities. So that's also defined in earlier slide deck, right? And sampling. Okay, this is something probably new a bit, right? So, but when you are doing your studies, you have to do sampling. So because we are not in a position to deal with the whole population, so we have to select a sample, and it's questionable whether you can do something with the whole population. So sample would do. So only thing is you have to use the proper methodology which is set in statistics and all this data science or whatsoever, right? So if you use that techniques, I don't see any problem of sampling. And then pervasive IS controls. So IS controls are a bigger thing than the IT controls. So there are discussions are going here on IS controls, and relationships and independence. Again, they stressed out the independence, and assessments and audit planning, same things again. Application system reviews. So a lot of these days IS auditing goes around in information systems. So those applications mostly. So you have to do reviews. Okay, so it goes like this. So these are the guidelines. So there's another set of them. Governance, reporting. So I don't have to explain all these things. Internet banking. These are specific ones. And sometimes auditors need to look at other documentation, other standards, other guidelines provided. So these are the things given from ISACA. Again, you can always refer to other common guidelines which are provided in NIST. So if you go to NIST, you can find separate guidelines. Or if you're doing in cloud computing, Cloud Security Alliance, CSA, and likewise CISI. So there are so many organizations who provide guidelines with the expertise knowledge. So it's always a good thing to follow through all these rules and regulations. All right. Moving on, and then see, you can see very specialized areas like mobile computing, right? So if you go to mobile computing, you can go to the organization OWASP, so they can give you a get better idea of a guideline, and see, like the common knowledge extracted and put it into this guideline. Forensics again, right? Competence is the skills of the auditor. So they can have a list of things. So you can always do your homework and see what's not there. Okay, so there's a long list here. So you have follow-up activities, biometrics, all these things fits together. So if you get any one of these things random, you can see that these things matters to a organization, right? So maybe some of the things are missing in small organizations, but yeah, so at one point you should implement it. All right, so it's a big discussion on the standards and also guidelines. All right, So moving on. Okay. So please do understand. Please do understand. If you want to really refer the content of this, you have to get this documentation. Some of them are freely available in ISACA website to download. Some of them are pay and get. So we are not supposed to look at any documentation which are copyrighted. So we have to understand. We have to as the right way, we have to buy some of this documentation. All right. Okay. I'm having a bit of issue. So just give me a bit of time. Right. Okay, we are back again. So we continue from this point onwards. Right. So then we looked at tools and techniques. So these are also quite useful things when you're dealing with an audit. So you find again sort of list starting with P. So we see this tools which you can always refer. So this was the date which it was published. So risk assessment, how do risk assessment, how do digital signatures, intrusion detection, virus and other malicious code. So those are very technical things. So when auditor needs to get some help on any of these things, we can refer to this particular documentation. So our purpose is actually to not go through details of it because then it might take a very long time. But we'll do some case studies, selecting probably one of them and try to understand what's happening in behind. All right, so this is what we have discussed. So we look at standards, guidelines, tools, and techniques. So one thing you guys have to remember, so all these things are tightly linked up. So there's high cohesion in between these three areas. So a good auditor should understand things from top down, looking from standards to guidelines to tools and techniques. So when you go through that flow, things will get quite interesting. So then again, there's another framework which is out there, which is ITAF, Information Technology Assurance Framework. Another tool as auditor you can use. So there's a specific set of documentation. We have standards, performance standards, reporting standards, processes, guidelines. So here's another alternative that you guys can have a look at. All right. So now we jump into risk analysis, right? So risk analysis is quite important because this will give you a more of a management friendly approach, right? So we have discussed this a bit, right? It's management friendly. All right. So the idea of that would be, say when you understand the risks, you understand where the business stands. So there are some risks which are low, there are some risks which are medium, right? And there are some risks which are high. So one thing you have to understand is in a normal organization, right? So we have to identify these risks and then we have to give solutions for this risk or address this risk in three different options or three categories, right? So for the three different categories. So so you have say your your way of handling the issues should be controls. So basically, so we'll have different types of controls for these three risk categories. All right, so that's the importance of uh, handling risk analysis, right? Or you want to look at the principle of risk. So risk analysis helps the IS auditor uh, in his or her evaluation to control the audit planning and assist the IS auditor in determining audit objectives and support risk-based audit decision making. So see, this one is quite important. Uh, so everything should be risk-based decision making. So because if it is not, right, uh, so we will be handling or will be having the same treatment for all the said issues. But when you look at from a risk angle, so we have always these levels. So then your controls all have all levels. So you don't have the same priority for all treatments. So we should not do that because we have to understand uh, this is not our business, right? This is not our business. So security and other things are like enablers. We say enablers. So we should not make it a disabler for the organization. So these are enablers, okay? Right? So we have to make them as enablers. So that should be our goal. Right. So IS auditors must be able to identify and differentiate risk types and controls. So you have to understand there are several risk types. So we had a general discussion about risk. So here we go a bit more deep into it. Common business risk, technology risks, and other relevant controls. So this can have multiple categories. So you have very good idea about these risks. Okay. So when you're doing the risk analysis, right, it's quite important to understand the process. So uh, the whole idea of doing this process is to get to know your issues and then try to solve those issues. So to do that, you have to start always from your business objectives, right? So your business objectives should be really related, right? And then you can look at assets related to these businesses, and then you can do the risk assessment process, right? And then you can do risk mitigation, and then the treatment, and then you can do evaluation. So it goes close in hand with the PDCA cycle, right? So same thing. So it's a cyclic thing. So here also you can see it's cyclic, and most of the audit processes are cyclic. So this nature can be seen in most of the processes. So and the core here would be to do the risk assessment. So this is risk-based audits. So these are risk-based audits. So that's what company have to run. All right. So then once you do the risk assessment, once you know your risks, so treatment should come in the way of controls, right? So as an example, you find there's a door and anybody can go in and come out, right? So you don't have any way of understanding who went in, went out. So you can put a biometric control. So that can be a simple internal control. You get the fingerprint, right? So, and then you can see who's coming in and out. And also you can have a nice camera here, video camera, right? So which has IR and all these things. They can also monitor who goes in and out. And also if they are piggybacking, somebody's helping somebody else to go in and all these things you can identify using this method. Right. And when you talk about this controls, internal controls especially, so there are three categories: classification, preventive. So to prevent things, when you see fingerprint scanner here is preventive. You prevent from intruder coming in. Detective is basically the camera, so it detects the issue, and also corrective actions. Okay, so these are some examples. You can actually go through this. So that's some of the detective and some of the corrective actions. And when you set your internal controls, you should have proper objectives. So again, going from top down. So you have to have these objectives to follow through. All right. So IS control objectives are quite similar in nature, right? So again, these are the objectives: safeguarding assets, Right? Whole purpose of doing this is to safeguard your assets, to identify risk of your assets, vulnerabilities of the assets, and risk to your assets. Then you can correct them. All right, and assuring the integrity of general operating system environments. Right. So when you do these controls, the issues of the operating systems, all these things can go away. And authorization of the input, so we'll handle inputs properly. When you filter inputs, accuracy of the completed transactions, when transactions going to make sure that it goes to the proper cycle, not in somewhere in middle. So we'll stop these situations. And accuracy of completeness and the database integrity. So all these things can be gained by using proper control objectives. So there's another list here. Ensuring appropriate identification authentication. So these are like security foundation sites. So we have to make sure everything is identified, authenticated, authorized, all these things. And complying with requirements policies. So you can set control objective to make sure that when you have a guideline or procedure or policy, to follow it up. So controls are needed to follow up any of these high level things. Right? And also to business control and disaster recovery. So quite a good example right now. So if you want to continue operations at the time of COVID, so we have to have lockdowns and also curfews, and also even like traveling in between districts to stop the spreading of the virus. So this can be a simple control. So now it's in place, which is really good. So which should be the case, right? And developing of incident response plan. So we know when incidents happen. So only thing is we cannot stop these external events. So the only thing is we have to have a response plan, right? All right. So now we discussed about audits, and we talked about audit standards, guidelines, and also procedures, or these tools and techniques. And we talked about risk in general and how it applies, and also controls, internal controls, control objectives. Right. So this is the second part of the risk lecture, right? So the next part would be we'll go through this COVID and other controls and the classification of the audit. So we'll come back to that a little later on. All right. So please make sure to go through the content and ask your questions in the Slack. And yeah. So and also I will post a separate video and explaining your assessment. So now is the right time to start your assessment. So I will give you another video explaining the assessment procedure and what you are supposed to do and how the submission should be done. All right. So thanks for the moment.